Welcome. My name is Dina Emser. I'm a lead trainer with the Positive Discipline Program, and I do a considerable amount of training with teachers in schools. And today, on my conversation with Kim Tabler, I wanted to address a question that always comes up in my teacher training, which is, yes, but what about parents? So today, I've invited Kim Tabler, who is a Positive Discipline Trainer candidate from Louisville, Kentucky. And Kim, I wonder if you would kick it off this morning and tell us just a little bit about your experience in a school setting working with parents.
Thank you so much for having me. In the school that I was previously involved with, we had 2 years old through 5th grade. So it was a preschool and elementary school, small independent school. All the teachers every school year were trained in positive discipline as a regular course of their professional development in a school year. In addition to that, the same class that the teachers received, we offered to parents. As I say, it wasn't required, but it was available to parents in this fall for morning time, and then in the spring in the evenings. And so as part of my duties was to be a parent educator. I was so lucky to be able to teach both the classes that happened for the teachers and that happened for the parents.
Okay, and how long did you have that job?
7 years.
Okay, so you're saying at least once yearly then the parents had an opportunity to take the same class of study as the teachers did.
That's right. Actually twice yearly, twice every school year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you also mentioned that at your school anyway, it wasn't mandatory for the parents.
That's right.
So kind of tell us a little bit about what sort of a response did you get from the parents in terms of like numbers? Did they want to do it? Did you get resistance?
I think that if the resistance would have been quiet because we weren't requiring it. So if people didn't want to come, they just didn't come. Yeah. But in the evenings, we had on average, when we offered it in the evening, 40 people in a class. Our school was a enrollment of about 175 children, okay. So maybe 150 families. Okay. So it's a reasonable percentage of families who chose to participate. The morning classes, the times that we offered it during the day were a little lighter, maybe 10 to 15, just based on people's schedules. So there was it was a very encouraging response. Many times people repeated the class. And so a lot of those people we had seen once or twice or more times before that.
Okay. And what did you make of that? What was it like to have them come back again?
We always encouraged them to come back again. It's different every time for everyone because you're in a different place. You've heard the information in a different way. There's just a myriad of reasons that you would repeat the class, and no one ever regretted repeating the class. And absolutely, it was fun to see different light bulbs come on at different times for different families, so that one time you're just trying to swallow it all. And if it's a big change and a big difference, the first time that parents took it's really just about a huge paradigm shift, and that's enough. And then the second time, they're already kind of in that paradigm. And then they get to really think about, oh, that's what they're talking about, or this is when I could use that at home with my child. So it was really exciting, actually, to see people that were that committed to coming. And second, how beneficial it was to just continue the process. Because it's never, the way that we presented it, it was never if you start at A and then eventually you'll get to B and that'll be the end. Just parenting in general is not that way, and working with children is not that way. And so the way that we presented the material was not that way. And when people really saw it as a process and a journey, it was very exciting to watch.
What impact, if any, did it have on the parents that you were also training their children in the same philosophy at school?
I think that it cannot even be measured. I mean, that was one reason that people actually chose to take the class. These are parents that were very committed to be on the same page as their child's school. That this school is very specific in their approach and in their interactions based in positive discipline. And so parents chose that for their child, being in a private independent school. And so within that choice became this idea that, gosh, they know what they're doing. It's working for my child, and my child loves it here. There must be something for me too. And so I think for the parents, it created community. It created an opportunity to feel empowered to do what their child's teachers were doing. And for the school and the children, for the children particularly, it just created such a firm kind of fabric, even if the parents were able to implement one or two strategies, and that's it. Many times, by the time children had been at the school once or twice, or 1 or 2 years, then they are teaching their parents about ways to interact with people and how to problem solve through issues at home and those kinds of things. And so it just created this cycle that was just so supportive, so that eventually children, it's like second nature to these kids. They really don't even have to be taught about it implicitly. They experience it and they live it. And so if they are able to live it at home and at school, it's just that it has that much more impact for them.
Yeah, what you just said, reminds me of what we always talk about with the idea of what you do is so much more important than what you say. And then those two things match, you really have a strong situation for kids to grow up in. So
absolutely.
What I'm guessing is that both the students or the kids modeled it for their parents from what they were learning at school, and then the parents taking the training and also just being a part of the school community allowed them to walk that talk as well.
Absolutely.
And what an interesting thing to think. So kids who are raised in that model, it's just part of who they are. They don't even really have to think about it.
It is amazing to watch. And then as children leave this particular school after 5th grade and go to a wide variety of different settings, they take it with them. And so the feedback that we got at school was that no matter what the setting or the scenario, other educators in other arenas could pick out kids who had come to our school in a minute. And the persistent observation was that they were good friends and good problem solvers. And so in a group, they really stood out because these are kids who are willing to take risks without really even considering it being an issue. There's all kinds of things feedback that we got in that way, but the biggest and just most pervasive across settings is that you can pick them out because they just want to work out problems and they're excited to learn. So I think that having the parents and the teachers in the same conversation creates that kind of environment for them. And they don't know any other way to be these kids. So
yeah, it's interesting to me that the parts that you heard about were basically their problem solving skills, their friendship, their ability to just sort of jump in and do what was needed without even considering it a risk. And I know that often with teachers, the question will come up then, well, and with parents too, what implications did you see, if any, for their academic growth?
That's interesting. As educators, we know that when the social emotional development is safe and firm and has a really good foundation, the academics come. And that's not to say you don't pay attention to the academics, but it's to say that first kids have to feel safe and connected and in relationships. And so it seems almost it's a direct correlation to academic success if kids feel as though they're connected to the community they're learning within. So definitely from an academic standpoint or from an education standpoint, I think that's the biggest impact, is because kids in a situation like this, where the parents and the teachers are all hearing and living the same message, they are obviously part of a community and connected. So they don't have to think about being safe or whether they are going to be accepted or whether somebody's going to be mean to them, because all of those things are clear and taken care of long before, a pencil is in their hand. So I think that's the biggest way that it impacts academics, is just because their social emotional growth is already settled and safe.
Wow. I don't know if you've heard Lynn Lott, one of the founders of Positive Discipline, talk about the child like a train leaving the station. and that the train runs on 2 tracks in order to be most efficient in terms of getting from
Okay.
one place to another. And so one track is the academic track, and the other track is the social emotional track. And it's just interesting to think about how many schools perceive kids can get that train going on one track.
Yes,
But
that's right. I love that.
well, think how much more solid that train's going to be leaving the
Right.
station if you've got both of those tracks covered. And from what you're saying, it sounds almost more like the foundational piece really is the social emotional. Once you've got that set, there's no reason why the train just can't go lickety split right down.
That's right. And even for children, children obviously learn in a wide variety of ways and in different levels. But the issues that when they come across challenges, if they have this social emotional side set and really feeling firm, challenges become opportunities. And it's not risky to try new things or do something in a different way than maybe their friends are doing it or their teachers even want them to. But again, even when kids are at different academic levels, because this foundation is very firm, it's really not an issue for them. It's just how things are, and this is what I'm going to do to enjoy it, learn from it, take the opportunity. And it's really pervasive across all the kids that I saw come through this school.
Well, and I'm remembering that what you told me about your experience as well is that you dealt a lot with the kids in situations where it wasn't necessarily an academic learning setting.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So part of my main role was to do the before and after school, all the things that were around the regular school day were under my management. And so that would be before and after school things, sports and summer camp and enrichments and those kinds of things. And so really, it was the perfect setup for me, because that is where you can really only need to focus on the social emotional aspects of things and see how the academics will come on their own. In my programs, I wasn't necessarily needing to focus on curriculum or particular standards, academic standards. And yet, those things arose when the activities were set up appropriately, and because kids were already making friends and being on a team and feeling part of a community. The before and after school program in particular was multi-age. I had all the ages of the school could be in this program. And so you could just sit as the adult, you could sit back and really pay attention to what was going on. And the older kids were ready and couldn't wait to take care of the younger kids, and the younger kids couldn't wait to see their big kid friends. It's really a family there in that situation. And they couldn't wait to come, and they never wanted to leave. And so, but I know that kind of kickoff to their school day, for example, or that environment to wrap up when they've been there all day affects directly the way that they are able to approach academics when they're there.
Yeah.
In the same way that any classroom environment is, just a third teacher.
It just reminds me of the whole Adlerian concept of holism.
Yes, yes.
That children are whole human beings, that you can't separate, out the part that goes to aftercare and the part that's the academic, and even just the holism idea that your school was kind of all in.
That's right.
Everyone operating from the same philosophy. I'm curious about parents that didn't go to the parenting class. Notice any difference with those parents? For example, I know one of the questions teachers often ask me in my trainings is, well, how are the parents going to feel if the child gets involved, in something and it shows up on the class meeting agenda, or they're very worried about children being singled out or called out, which I find very interesting because, in a class meeting setting, it really isn't punitive.
Right.
But in the real world, kids are called out and singled out all the time in a pretty shocking way. But I'm just curious to know whether parents had any concerns at your school if they didn't really go to the parenting class and they didn't fully understand the safety of a setting.
Well, it certainly is a different paradigm than most parents are familiar with. And so their experience kind of filters how they perceive something. And so if they aren't aware of how, for example, a class meeting might work, then their immediate go-to is going to be what their experience was, which was probably, or most likely, lots of times, more punitive and more shameful. So there is that kind of gateway to start. It's a little bit different in this school because people have chosen this school independently as a private school. And so there was something about it. And that's what we always said in the kind of marketing talk about it, is that there's something that was a draw to this particular school. And even if many times new parents weren't necessarily able to articulate that in the way that we kind of felt like it might be for them, there's something about it when you walk in the building that there's this feeling, or it's something that's not quite measurable, but there's a draw. So you, as educators, I mean, we certainly, all of the faculty and all the administration saw ourselves as parent educators for all the families at our school. And so every piece of communication, whether it be carpool when I'm getting your child out of the car, all the way to weekly, electronic newsletters, and it just every time that you interact with a family as an administrator or a teacher, that feeling needs to be portrayed. And so it might not be, here is what a class meeting is, number one, number two, number three, right? It's not necessarily that implicit, but all communication includes the idea that we respect you, we respect your child is learning, mistakes are always opportunities, here's how we work out problems. And so it's in the same way that the parenting piece is really a journey all the time, educating parents is the same. And so that, always being so mindful of the way that our message was communicated, so that you just build these little blocks a little bit at a time. And parents who are more ready or to hear more of it. And new parents who are resistant, hear what they are ready to hear. And you just take every opportunity to give out more.
I love what you just said. It just seems so encouraging to take your role as an educator and also share what you know with parents. Because parents
It's
need
critical.
Desperately.
Yeah.
They need good information. They need people who are willing to model for them what the Positive Discipline Program really stands for. And I've also talked with a lot of teachers now. They may be in a pretty discouraged place with parents. They've been in maybe a setting where this wasn't the philosophy that was used, clearly.
Sure.
But it's almost like they feel like, hey, that's not my job. It's not my job to educate parents. But what I hear you saying is you just weave it into the philosophy of everything you do. Every interaction you have, whether it's with a parent or I'm guessing even a community member who comes in.
Absolutely.
Treat it the same way. I noticed that I did not say in my introduction that I had also directed a school where this kind of an approach was used, and we did parent education as well. And I just remember something that you mentioned, that people would come in as visitors and come into our school, and they would say things like, I don't exactly know why, but your place just feels different.
Yes.
So it just was always an interesting comment, and one that I could certainly appreciate, because I felt that way too, as the director. When I'd come in, it's like, wow, I'm home,
That is so fascinating that you had that experience as well, because that almost word for word would be what people felt like just walking through the lobby.
Yeah.
What is happening here? Why does this feel so different? So I love to hear that in another school in the same philosophy had that exact experience. It's interesting.
And it was always interesting to see how the kids, even if they were busy at work in their classroom, if somebody came through as a prospective parent or a visitor,
Yes.
they would almost always, come up to the person, tell them who they were, tell them what they were working on, and sort of suck them right into the classroom community as soon as they walked through the door. There were
Same exact experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. It really is. I mean, I get goosebumps just talking about it. It really is a very pervasive, in a very good way.
Yes. Yes. If you are once you start the intentionality of it as a school, which comes from leadership and whatever else those special things are, sometimes it's hard to even measure for us. When it's basic, it's an expectation. It comes out of hiring. It comes out of choices in the way that you manage people, all the way down to how the building looks and if it's clean and ready for people. All of those things. Once you start being intentional about it, that intentionality kind of snowballs so that because you're living it too, as an adult in a school like this, faculty, administrators, and everyone else, it's almost like you can't help it anymore because if it feels good, it's the right thing, and it's now your community. And so once it starts, even with new teachers or new people, it's easily picked up on. You can really tell that there's something, and here are the things to be intentional about. And then you become automatically intentional without even really knowing it.
Yeah. It's like you mentioned earlier, it's a process, but it's also a practice.
Absolutely.
A practice. It's something that
Yes.
you continue to make a part of your daily practice. So, Kim, I have a couple of specific questions about the parenting arrangement that you all had.
Sure.
You said that you taught the classes both during the day for parents who were available and also as evening classes. And that sometimes you had as many as 40 people sign up in the evening. How did you manage on your own 40 people?
I should have been more clear. So in big groups, I co-taught with someone. Many of the methodology, the delivery wasn't exactly the same as the specific positive discipline method, because we were also using Developing Capable Young People by Stephen Glenn, which has just a little bit of a different delivery method. The ideas and the concepts are pretty much the same. It did become harder and harder to involve the parents in a way that felt good as the group got bigger. So if, for example, breaking out into small groups was more difficult just logistically and time-wise, or having any kind of a lot of time dedicated to experiential activities does get harder with a bigger group. But because I had the head of the school co-taught, and I co-taught, and so that helped that a little bit, and just so that you were able to manage the crowd a little bit better.
And did you ever get then parents who came back, did you ever get those people involved in maybe some of the leadership?
That is such a great idea, and that did not happen.
Okay.
No, I mean, we would know the people to call on if things got quiet or needed better examples. And so it was really a lot of discussion and conversation. And so naturally those people became leaders because they just weren't shifting their paradigm anymore. They were just practicing and practicing. So in that way, I guess that's a way that we did involve them. But it was not like an intentional, agenda item or anything like that.
Okay. I'm trying to think what other questions I have to share. Are there any specific situations you can think of that are like stories that you'd be willing to share with us? And I'll give you a couple of minutes to think, because one of the other things I wanted to know if you would address, I know that you're no longer with this school, and that's pretty recent. And I wondered if you'd tell us a little bit about your future plans.
Sure. Are you asking for stories like from parents, or help me?
Yeah, just anything that might stand out as kind of a highlight for you of something like how that a parent had, or particular impact both the parenting and the classroom structure might have had on a child that comes to mind. And if you can't.
Oh gosh, yes, there's so many. I did just recently change jobs, and so in the process of leaving that school, a parent came to me with a kind of a broad perspective of his time at this school. This was a dad who, and these were his words that I know for sure he would be thrilled for me to share. He said that when his children started, which would have been 6 years, maybe 5 years prior to this conversation. He said, he told his wife, I trust you, whatever your judgment is about whatever school we're going to send our kids to, you just go do that. I'm the guy that works, and I'm the guy who, brings the money home, and we're just going to do what you say. And he said, I liked it here. It was great. It's fine. But then he stopped and said, but that's when I was learned, not when I was a learner.
Oh.
And so this couple took the class, I know twice. It could have been 3 times, but I know for sure twice. And now this dad is incredibly involved on the board, doing buildings and grounds things, and really the best spokesperson for taking a positive discipline class that you could come up with. He said, doing what we did here at Chance, the name of the school, has changed my relationship with my wife, with the people that I work with, and definitely with my children. And so he really had this perspective of, I used to be on one end, doing what I knew to do and what I thought was the right thing. And now I am a learner and have grown to this, another person. And for me to think about that time, and I remembered him as the learned, and it was fine, but we just didn't see him. We didn't know him, And so it was a really neat way to kind of wrap up that time, so that I could, knowing that that there was a parent who had that perspective, and he was the one who was willing to come say it. But I know that he was representative of a large group of people who felt the same. So it's just a very interesting kind of long-term perspective.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, Stephen Glenn is the main author of Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. His co-authors are Jane Nelson and Lynn Lott. So he definitely was, at a particular time, a very influential person in the Positive Discipline program. Kind of took off and did something of his own called Developing Capable People, and then Developing Capable Young People. So, but there's that quote that he uses in the book that's something about, I can't remember it exactly, but something about the people who will actually inherit the earth are the learned, rather than the learned.
Yes.
That distinction. I don't think it's his quote, it's somebody else's, but he does. Right. I remember reading that in his book as well. Like, we have to be able to change and adapt and prepare our kids for the world they will inherit, and not the one that we grew up in, because good grief, it's just a whole different.
Absolutely. I mean, it's different yesterday than today.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So, Kim, is there any advice you would give a school that was doing the positive discipline training for their staff about also maybe including or working towards involving the parents in the educational part?
I would say be excited about small changes. If you are really on fire about this work and really feel passionate about it, it's hard to recognize that if you don't go from 0 to 100% right away, you are still making an impact. And so if you can't get 100% of the parents at 100% of the classes and gain 100% of the content, don't make that a barrier. Because if you reach 2% of your parents with one concept, that's a gain. Those people, for people who didn't have it before. So I would say for sure, just in your mindset to be thinking about small changes and be excited about the small changes, excited and comfortable and ready for that, because that's how change happens. And definitely listen to parents. I think the thing that we really had to learn and continue to adjust are parents' needs in terms of timing, so that it is a challenge to get parents committed enough to, ours were 8-week series, 2 hours a week. So we did a lot of surveying. How many parents want to have it in the morning? How many parents want to have it in the evening? We ended up in the end offering childcare and including dinner. So things like that, the needs of parents will really affect the way, the success, I guess, of your class. So a little work up front and being willing to tweak that as you go I think is a really important piece so that you really can make as much impact as possible.
So one question now I have after hearing that, did you charge parents to take the class?
Yes, there was a fee for the class. Yes.
Okay. And then I'm guessing if they chose to use the childcare, that there was maybe an additional fee for that?
There was. The fee for the childcare was so nominal that we ended up really, it was just kind of a token to offer it. So the evening classes were from 5 to 7, and our after school program ended at 6.
Okay.
So it was essentially an additional hour for kids whose parents were in the parenting class. And that's when dinner came at 6. So there was an additional fee for that per family, but it was just very nominal.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have not heard of that particular model, but it seems like it would make a lot of sense.
Well, it certainly evolved. We did not always offer that, but as we really saw the structure of families changing even in our small community, where there were more people who work, who have 2 working parents, more people with multiple children and multiple activities. It had the potential to become the one barrier for parents to coming to the classes, that they just couldn't figure out. It was just too much to do on an evening. So as much as we could support them in that way and try to give them some padding that way. And kids, like I mentioned before, are thrilled to stay an extra hour and have dinner at school. So it just evolved that way, just by us paying attention.
Okay. I will just toss out that one of the things we discovered is that if we could provide like a Saturday, an occasional Saturday that was more of a full day workshop kind of a format, where we also provided childcare, provided lunch, and then the teachers took responsibility for offering different kinds of Adlerian training.
Like that.
Really fun. And, it just was a great way to build community.
Right.
A couple of Saturdays a month, rather than, because some people really did balk at making a commitment of either 6 to 8 weeks,
an
hour and a half or 2 hours a night. So, yeah. So the sounds like the name of the game is poll your parents.
Yes.
Remember to address their needs in terms of timing. Try to make yourself as available and convenient for them as possible in the lives of their kids, because everybody's overscheduled now.
That's right. You don't want to become one more thing on the list, on the agenda, on the calendar, particularly if you're an educator who's preaching fewer things on the calendar. So you just have to help them prioritize and make sure that you are still the thing that stays on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like your school got very creative about figuring out a position that you held that could be both part of the daily life of the school and then also be the person kind of in charge of the parent offerings as well.
Yes, that just, again, it evolved and came by circumstance, in that I was a parent educator and teacher educator before I came to the school, doing a lot of the Stephen Glenn work. And so it worked out great and just happened to be what I ended up doing.
And then would you like to use this as a kind of an entree into telling us a little bit about what you're going to be doing?
Well, thank you. Sure. I, as of August 1st, am really trying to use, I have launched my own business and left school so that I could really reach a wider audience. And so my work at Thrive is to offer professional development for teachers, early childhood providers and teachers, as well as parents, in a variety of settings and in a variety of ways. So coaching and consulting and workshops, so that I can drop the positive discipline into many different buckets instead of just one focused audience.
Okay. So for those people in the Louisville, Kentucky area, just know that Thrive is now alive and well. And
yes, it is.
Taking on new clients, I'm guessing.
Yes, absolutely. Every day.
That's great. That's great. Well, I love the idea of you being able to offer positive discipline training, especially to parents who are in different settings than the one you experienced, which sounds like it was a pretty ideal setting, by the way.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It was the perfect setup. Yeah.
So I wish you well with that. I know
Thank
we're
you.
connected in that endeavor, and I really want to thank you for being here with me today and sharing what you know for both schools and for parents.
Absolutely. Definitely my pleasure.
I want to end by just saying that this analogy comes to my mind that, I've been in education a long time.
Mhm.
I rarely say exactly when I started. I love to keep it a mystery, right? But I remember when I started teaching as a first year out of college, I got this wonderful job teaching first grade, 29 first graders. Can you imagine? Who in their right mind would give a new teacher 29 first graders is beyond me. But the good news was the teachers in my building were so helpful,
Mm.
and the parents were so helpful. I felt like we were a team, like our hands were joined. And then the longer I stayed in education and the more I worked with different teachers in different settings, I felt more like we were doing this with parents.
Mm.
We were bumping heads like it was us against them. And I think, that mentality still exists out there in many places,
Mhm.
like teachers against parents. But what I love about the positive discipline program is that there's an arm, literally an arm of the program for teachers, an arm of the program for parents, so that again, we can join our hands as the two groups of people who can best support, right? The
Yes.
growth and development of young people. So that's the image I keep in my head always
Love
of
it.
what I'm about. It's like the hands joined idea. So
Absolutely.
good luck to you,
Thank you so much.
business. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope all of you who are out there watching today will have benefited from this guest who basically has the message. Get those parents involved in your school, train them, make them part of your community as well. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Dina.
You're welcome. My pleasure.